This is MMA Tonight on Sirius XM Fight Nation.
Let's make some money, people. I'm RJ Clifford. He's Jimmy Smith. Joining us now, the host of Rotowire's Fight IQ podcast. The podcast can be found on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher, et cetera, et cetera. You know where the podcasts are. His name's Sean Diaz. How you doing, Sean?
I'm great. How are you guys?
Fantastic. We appreciate you taking some time for us. So when you look at UFC 241, I'm looking at the odds right now. Pretty competitive up and down. Is there one line that's just so juicy to you can't help but tell us about it?
Betting DraftKings is a little different, but in terms of when I bet, and those are the guys I play heavier on DraftKings, Manny Bermudez to me at minus 135. That just doesn't feel right to me. The guy's submission skills are off the charts. The Bermudez triangle for a reason. Casey Kenny, yeah, he won his UFC debut against Ray Borg, but I mean, the judges gave him that one. I don't think he won that fight. I don't think most people think he won that fight. And really, his strengths are his grappling, his striking is okay, but the second he hits the mat with Bermudez, I think he's in a world of trouble. And minus 135 and 8,400 on DraftKings, right in that mid-range. It's really juicy, especially when not many people are going to play him. Most people are going to want to play Anthony Pettis, DC, Diaz, those guys. Manny Bermudez is a little bit different and a line that I think is really good.
So the line is very close in the main event. Daniel Cormier, Stipe Miocic. Stipe was a slight favorite the first time. DC's now a slight favorite this time. Are you going to play either one of them heavily in any of your games?
It's funny. So on Rotowire, I was actually the only staff member to pick the reigning baddest man on the planet, which is just bizarre to me. So when we do Fight IQ tomorrow, I want to pick their brains on it. Stipe is going to be popular, I think. I think the narrative of DC being 40, probably his last fight, Stipe is bigger, DC landed a lucky punch, all that stuff. The way for DraftKings, I'm actually going to play both these guys. The heavyweight fight, the fight is minus 350. Fight does not go to decision. If you don't play DraftKings a lot, especially those big tournaments where we're trying to win $100,000 or whatever the top prize is this week, which I believe it is $100,000 to first place in the big tournament, that number is one I look at a lot. DraftKings rewards both grapplers, but more importantly, fights that end inside the distance. So I want typically heavyweights, light heavyweights, and then just those fighters who are known for finishing like a Sadiq Youssef. So to answer your question, I'm going to play both these guys. To me, I like the grappling of DC. Everyone's saying the size of Stipe is going to negate that, and we saw a little bit in the first matchup. But DC had success with his dirty boxing. He could press the grappling harder. He's an Olympic level wrestler. I just there's too many advantages for me to not play Daniel Cormier. I will say though that when you're entering those big contests, if you're going to play one of them, I'm going to play Daniel Cormier. If you're going to play 3, 4, 5 lineups, you can play multiple of each side trying to hit on those fights that are going to score highly. And no matter who wins in that scenario, you're going to have one of the guys who are likely to end up on that first place lineup. So I'm playing both. I personally, though, am going to have more of Daniel Cormier.
When I look at this fight card, you see a lot of veteran names. Of course, the main event, Daniel Cormier, Stipe, Nate Diaz, Anthony Pettis. A lot of people excited about that. Yoel, Romero, Paulo, Costa. A lot of fighters that get an emotional reaction from fans. What kind of things like that, when you see a card like that with a lot of names, Nate Diaz hasn't fought in a long time, up and down, but fans love him. Anthony Pettis, up and down the last few years, but fans love him. What kind of emotional traps do you see, or are you trying to advise people to stay away from when it comes to betting on fighters they have a strong emotional reaction to?
Exactly. It's got to be about the analytics. Unless you're just saying, hey, I like this guy, I'm going to bet on him. All right, I get the emotional to it, but if you're trying to make money long term, you have to detach from that. It's all about odds. And that Pettis-Diaz fight that's a pick-up. That's a total stay away for a betting perspective. For me, it comes down to Diaz. Everyone thinks of his wild striking. He's historically a slow starter. Pettis up at 170, but Diaz is not going to be a monster over him. He's floated his whole career between lightweight and welterweight. And what's the most interesting thing, talking about those large tournaments, people want to play Pettis and Diaz. So you have this situation where they're going to get higher ownership in that contest, then they probably warrant. The same thing happened. The best example of that is Cowboy Cerrone. But Pettis and Diaz are going to fall into that category too, where everyone wants to play them because they have an emotional attachment. The sharper players are going to, I think, going to be underweight to those guys. The fight has got a very low inside the distance prop, and actually, if I pull it up, it is fight goes to decision minus 165. So we're likely going to see 3 rounds of striking. Decisions, striking match. Typically, those two things don't score well on DraftKings. Nate Diaz is a little cheaper, and in his wins, he actually scores a little better. So for me, it's a weird scenario where DraftKings is just different than betting. And I'm picking Anthony Pettis to win a fight, a really close fight. But Diaz makes for the better DraftKings play. He scores higher in his wins. Pettis typically doesn't score great in his wins. We've seen Pettis be submitted before, although he's got a really impressive submission win himself over Dubronx Oliveira. It's one of those, I think neither one of these guys should be very highly owned, but they're going to be just based on that line value. So by not playing them, I get an advantage over the field. Even though, I love those guys and huge fans, it's just taking my heart away from money. If you have a really strong read in the fight, then absolutely, go ahead and invest in it. I just think if you remove emotion from it, that's a near impossible fight to call.
Yoel Romero, Paulo Costa, this fight could go anywhere. It could end at any time. It could go to decision. We could see just about anything in this fight just because of the two guys. Yoel Romero, incredibly explosive, one of the best athletes, I think, in UFC history. And Paulo Costa is like a tank moving forward on you, throwing punches, and has yet to lose. What are your thoughts on a fight that's this unpredictable? Is it a stay-away kind of fight?
See, this one's weird because now I have to almost go back on the rule I just mentioned. So that my key stat fight.
That's what I do, bro. I ask the hard questions. I know it's tough, but that's what I do.
I know, minus 360. The thing is, Yoel Romero is the third round finish king. He's got so many of them, and I almost think Costa is going to play into that. We saw him start to slow down against Uriah Hall. We've seen Costa taking down Oluwale Bamboze, took down Paulo Costa. If he can get down Costa, you don't think Yoel Romero can do that? I think if he's smart, Romero's going to take this fight to the ground, tire Costa out, and likely gets a third-round finish. I don't think it's a stay-away fight in terms of that big GPP. I think we're going to want to play both sides of it. Again, I'm going to have much more Romero. I'm pretty confident he gets the job done here. I think this is too much too soon for Costa. I know he looks great. The dude is huge. He's got 4 wins, and the first 2 are against guys who are no longer in the UFC, Bamboche, Gareth McClellan. This is a big, big step up. Uriah Hall to Yoel Romero. Wow. Now, Romero's 40, and maybe he's in the back end, and we think he's 40. Who knows how old he actually is? Who knows where this is going to go? I think in terms of where Romero's head is at, and that weight cut is just going to keep getting harder and harder. I right now want to say I'm all about Yoel Romero, but if he looks horrendous on the scales again, I'll probably temper my expectations just a little bit. I really like Romero in that matchup, and I think the line should be wider. It's a matter of just how Bohashina looks and the hype around him that has this line closer than it should be. Yoel Romero, his losses are just to Robert Whittaker. He's beaten Jacare Souza. He's beaten big names. I think he's getting discounted a little bit here just because of the age, similar to Daniel Cormier. Now, there's something to that because Father Time gets everybody. I just don't think it's Saturday night.
Shanaez is Rotowire. Shanaez here on MMA Tonight. I'm RJ. He's Jimmy. So if I'm making a DraftKings lineup, right? I'm really here to make some money. I really like UFC 241. How do you construct a lineup or multiple lineups? You said, all right, I'm going to do 5 or 6 lineups, and then some of them I'll have DC, some of them I'll have Stipe. Do you have a general game plan, or if it's different every time, let me know? But do you have a general sort of template for how you tackle a fight card and how you build it?
So for me, trying to make money doing this long term, I'd play both cash games and those big tournaments. Those big tournaments are great. They're really sexy. 100,000 up top, 25,000 in first place. They're incredibly hard to win. Mm-hmm. So I mix in plenty of cash games, which is those double ups, those head-to-heads, and there's a different strategy for both. So going to the GPPs, those or guaranteed prize pools, those are the big tournaments, the GPP for short. I will take plenty of risks. I want, as I mentioned a few times, those high inside the distance prop. fights. I want Romero, Costa. I want Cormier and Miocic. I want, Sadiq Youssef, who's, likely to get a finish. Devontae Smith, there's, minus 800 to win his fights. Guys who are likely to get a knockout. Derek Brunson's probably the best example on this card. I think we've seen it from him before. Except for the Anderson Silva fight, he is kill or be killed. He's going to score 100 or he's going to score, 1. He's a guy that I'm perfectly willing to roster in those big tournaments trying to win everything, but in those cash games, those double-ups, I want to build safe lineups. The general rule is you have 6 fighters on a roster. I want 4 wins. So I'm going to go and get some odds value towards the most expensive fighters, trying to lock down some likely wins, a Devontae Smith, for example. Even Hannah Cyphers, who's hovering around minus 300. And even though those are striking-based fights, I'm okay with them not scoring 110. I'm okay just locking down a win, 50 or 60 extra points, a total of 80, 90, just moving on. Let other people make your mistakes. And then in those cash games, I think somebody on the other side of the Cyphers fight, oddly enough, I wouldn't play both of them in the same lineup, but you can look at Jodie Esquibel, who is not likely to win the fight, but even when she loses, she scores 30 to 40 points. She lands strikes. She doesn't get finished. I'm okay doing that. I'm okay with fighters who have a high floor, who even in their losses, they're going to score some points. So it's 2 different strategies, and I think the biggest mistake people make if you're trying to make money long-term is you have to play both. You can't just chase the 100,000 up top. I think in the past couple of years, I've won 3 or 4 of those big tournaments. I haven't won the giant one up top yet, but there's different levels of those tournaments, and they're hard to hit is the point. I do this every week. You hover near, you can have great weeks and not quite win everything, but those cash games, they're much better for long-term success. It's much easier to beat, 50 people out of 100 than it is to beat, you have the top lineup out of 20,000 entries, even if you're entering 150 times.
His name's Sean Diaz. You can catch him on Rotowire's Fight IQ podcast, also on the Twitter machine at the DF Sniper. Sean, thanks for stopping by.
Thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.